Hi, welcome to Gridiron Gurus for the Kennebec Journal and Morning Sentinel. I'm Travis Lazarczyk alongside Drew Bonifant. Drew, we've reached the halfway point of the season.
Halfway through.
All right, our guest this week is from Winthrop, Monmouth, Halldale. Did I get them all, Coach?
You get them all?
All right, Dave St. Hilaire. Coach, thanks for being with us.
Anytime.
Coach, you're coming off a pair of notable games in your schedule. We'll start with one last week. Come back win over Poland 33-29. And I talked to you at the start of the year, or at the start of the week, and you were saying it was kind of a mixed bag of feelings. One, it was nice to pull out a late win like that, coming back in the fourth, but also that you saw some areas where you wanted to see the team kind of clean up. Just talk about your takeaway from that win.
Yeah, well, we've had 3 touchdowns dropped, 3 touchdown passes dropped this year, and then last week we had 2 touchdowns taken off with penalties. The biggest concern we have right now is our focus. We're good for 3 or 4 plays, and then something happens, and it takes our focus away. So that's been the theme this week: is stay focused 100% of the time. And we ran a few hills today for having the 11 penalties that we did. So we got to clean those things up, and we've got to be crisp, for the second half of the year.
Is that a nice thing to take into the second half, though, to say, okay, we don't have that focus all the time, but we seem to have it channeled when we need to in the fourth, because you had a close win over Oak Hill earlier this year as well, kind of a gut check win there. So is it nice to see, even if it's not 100% of the time, you seem to have it going when you need to?
Yeah, well, Al Davis once said, you don't have to be great all the time, you just have to be great in the moment. And we've certainly done that, but we've got to be better throughout the game, and not just when the chips are on the table, because if we're better throughout the game, then maybe we don't get into that situation where we have to pull out a win.
It seemed like from the outside your season, because you beat Poland last year after a tough start, and it seemed like that win kind of got things going for you into the second half. You ended up getting that big playoff win over Lisbon. Do you think that this could serve kind of a similar focus? Gets you to 2-2 and kind of sets you up for a good second half.
I look at the not the Cape game, but the Wells game where we played well,
yeah.
And we gave them a good battle. That was when we really knew, hey, we've got a team here, and now it's just a matter of piecing things together, and Poland just another step on the way of getting us where we want to be. But it certainly helps being 2-2 and not 1-3.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny you mentioned that, because that was the other game I was going to get into was that game against Wells. We've talked seemingly every week on the show about how it's Class D and then there's Wells, it's D South and then there's Wells, and Wells just steamrolls the competition. But you had the closest game against them, 36-18 loss. But this wasn't like they took a 36-0 lead and let off the gas and you got some late touchdowns. You were battling them throughout the game. What went into that? Was that just, were you able to kind of pick up something on Wells that the other teams haven't been able to see, or was it just the team was really on its game that day?
One of the defenses we run is it's a bear defense. It's similar to the Chicago Bears 46 defense. It was something that Chris Kempton and Joel Stone put together. It's our bear defense, and it's something that Wells we knew had not seen. So we caught them by a little bit of a surprise, and they made some adjustments throughout the game. And it's always fun when you see Tim Roche make 2 different adjustments on you, because you think what you're doing is working. But we noticed some things that we didn't do well with that bear defense that we can do better the next time we see them. But that was really what surprised them. And being able to throw the ball and have a quarterback that can run. We went into that game, our running game we knew was going to be Keegan Choate, scrambling, design runs, draws, and out of the pocket. And we picked up 335 yards of total offense. So right there with them, it's just a matter of we need to clean some things up the next time we play them.
And one thing that stood out when I talked to you after that game was you said the team had a lot of confidence going in, because I remember we do our weekly previews for the games, and I think I said something like, the goal for Monmouth is to make sure this isn't running time in the second half or something, and you get some things to build on. I may have played you guys down a little bit. Apologies for that. But you said the team went in there expecting to win a football game, not intimidated by Wells at all.
Our message to the kids every day at practice that week was, we're going down to win a game. We're not going down to be intimidated. It's going to be a circus atmosphere, because it was at homecoming as well, and they had video outside. They had a parade going from the middle school to the high school. But it was day after day, we're going down to win a game. And it was simple as that. And the kids bought in, and we went down with the right attitude. And if you can't believe it, it's not going to happen. And the kids certainly had that belief that we could beat them.
Class C Marana Cook on the schedule for this week, and now is the goal, kind of the flip side of that, making sure that, just like you wanted to make sure that they're ready to go for a team like Wells, to make sure that they're not kind of looking past a team like this and at the rest of the schedule, and making sure that they have their intensity ready for this week.
Yeah, the shoe's certainly on the other foot, because we told them all week that Coach Pokey's not going to have these guys intimidated by us. They're going to come in ready to play, and we need to be ready to play. We need to execute that focus of every play, the next play, being focused, and we've got to make sure that these guys are ready to play and not taking anything lightly this week.
Coach, your league is as tight as any in the state right now. You have Lisbon and Wells, which are both 4-0, and they play each other this week, which will be a fantastic game. But everybody else, the other 6 teams, are all 2-2, which, usually when you get down to this midpoint of the season, there's at least somebody struggling. But what do you think, as this keeps going, the little things will be that kind of shake this out a little bit?
Team staying healthy and who's getting better throughout the year. Some teams seem to be better earlier in the season, and they don't improve. It's the ones that stay with it, fight through that adversity, get themselves in a good position. And I think every coach in the conference has said Wells is clearly number 1, Lisbon's that number 2, and then you take the rest, and you throw them in a hat, pull them out, and one could be 3, and the other one could be 8.
It's evidenced by some of the close games you guys have had and won. So. Let's look now at the halfway point of the season, 8-game year. We're halfway there. Drew, any surprises stand out to you or anything that you take from the first half?
Mount Blue's competitiveness was something that came out. Now they had a tough loss to Brewer. Mm-hmm. That kind of tempered that a little bit. But Randy Barker running as well as he has, kind of showing himself to be one of the better backs in the conference. That's just a team that the last couple of years has been having a rough go of it, and been on the outside of the playoff picture, and they've taken a big step towards being a more competitive team this year. So that was surprising, but also I was surprised to see the win that Coney had against Lawrence last week, and to see where they are in Class B North. Knew they were going to be a playoff team, knew they had a good defense. We've been saying this all along, but to see the way that they've put it together at times and how good they've looked has been. I think that they've at least met some of the expectations that people may have had for them at the start of the year.
Yeah, the only loss for the Rams, a 1-point loss to Skowhegan.
Yeah.
So, for me, it might be not a surprise, but just kind of what we thought would happen with Class C North, where we saw MCI, Winslow, Herman, and to an extent, Nokomis is kind of being the 4 class teams of the league, and right now that's bared out. MCI beat Herman last week 29-25. Winslow's right there at 3-1, along with MCI and Herman. Nokomis is right behind them at 2-2. A lot of games between those teams coming up in the second half of the year, so we'll see how it shakes out. Coach, is there anything that's been a surprise to you? I know you got to follow your own team.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Drew, because Coney didn't seem to be hitting on all cylinders in their exhibition game and in their scrimmage. But they have certainly seemed like getting better each week, and they're putting up points like some of those good Coney teams of the past few years.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much film circulates and everything, but people probably saw the game tape against Skowhegan, where the Skowhegan defense started to figure out the Coney offense, started to win at the line of scrimmage, and really make yards hard to come by for Coney. Maybe thought, okay, that's where we can get these guys, and I wonder if they saw. That's supposedly supposed Achilles heel of Coney looked like a real strength last week against Lawrence, and maybe thought, oh boy, maybe this isn't as unbalanced a team as we were hoping, and maybe this is a team that's going to be difficult to match up with on both sides of the ball.
We'll find out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, another issue that's kind of been in high school football in Maine for a while now is low participation numbers on programs throughout the state. Now, last week, Orono played at Mount View with just 13 players. Well, to me, that's absurdly low. Mm-hmm. Coach, is there a number that you have in your head where you say we just don't have the bodies to play a game this week?
Every week we do that for JV.
Yeah.
And, but I would say that 14, 15 mark, that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Trape a few weeks ago played Maranacook, and they had 3 kids on the sidelines. And Dirigo, I think, played one game in the last couple of weeks with 11. That's what I've been told, but I haven't seen the film.
That's the rule. You only need 11 to start the game. And I guess I can't blame Orono for giving it a go. There's a competitive drive in every team, or at least there should be, or you shouldn't be out there to begin with. But at the same time, oh man, I keep coming back to that 13 number in my head and going, that's nuts. They ended up having to stop the game a minute 14 to go because Orono just ran out of healthy bodies.
And the MPA had a meeting this week where they did some discussions on 8-man football.
Yeah.
And some of those teams may have to make that choice to go to 8-man football, which is totally different from 11-man.
Yeah, or swallow your pride and play developmental league. I know a lot of teams don't want to do that to have rich traditions, but sometimes you have to put that aside for the safety and well-being of the program.
We've talked about the 8-man on this show from week to week, and Coach, do you have an opinion on that? Because we get obviously the pluses to it and how it does allow more teams to play football competitively, but also the downside is different game. It's departure from what we know as football, so on and so forth. So do you have an opinion on it?
Well, a couple, because I've coached 8-man football 2 years in middle school or 5th, 6th grade in Augusta quite a few years ago. But the other thing that you have to think about is the field size. Do you do an 80 by 40 field? Do you put the goalposts at the 80 yards, and what does that do to the soccer team, the field hockey team that shares the field? Sure. But also, it's where it's a totally different game. One of our assistant coaches has a good friend in Nebraska who coaches 8-man football, and the ones that coach 11-man football and they change over to 8-man, it's not the same game, and they tend to struggle because they don't know those nuances of the 8-man, and it's a tough thing to change.
Yeah. The one thing is, if it happened in Maine, it would be a lot of teams doing it together, so you might not have that. I guess they'd all struggle, is what I'm saying. Should the MPA have a minimum requirement to play a game, other than just have 11 to throw on the field? Do you think, or just throwing it out there?
I've coached a JV game where I had 12, and one kid got taken to the hospital halfway through the game in like second quarter, and the official came over and says, "You might want to save your timeouts." Yeah. But it is. You put kids that aren't in a position that they're going to be comfortable in. It is a safety factor. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Trape almost won a state title with 14 kids.
Yeah, Stearns in 2010 went to the state game with a very small roster, 15 or 16, I think. So.
Well, it reminds me. I did a story 2 years ago on Maranacook struggling with numbers and everything, and Bill Getty was the coach at the time. And he made an interesting point where he said, it's not so much the numbers. If you give me 15 kids, but they're 15 football players, fine, sure. Let's roll. That's it. It's the problem is when it's 15 kids, 7 of which have never played before the year and don't know how to protect themselves on the field and everything like that. So is that kind of how you look at it too, where it's not always about the numbers, but just kind of the caliber of player we have within those numbers?
Yeah, if you've got 13 or 14 football players and you're going into a game, you got to feel comfortable, but if you have 6 football players and 7 kids that, we've got some freshmen, and you think of, can those kids take and play for 4 quarters against somebody, 3 years older than them and 40 pounds heavier and more experience? It's a tough decision.
Yeah. Yeah, those Trape teams and Stearns teams we mentioned were, small rosters, but football players 1 through 15 or whatever.
Yeah, and that's what Getty was saying was in that game. He was talking about a game they put against Lisbon, and back then Lisbon had that Noah Francis kid, the big running back, and he's like, this kid's just trampling our guys. Like, the players we have aren't also 230, 240 pounds and able to make a hit. Their players are running out there are 150 pounds and that's where you get the concern of
men versus boys.
Right, exactly.
Well, it's like letting the varsity go up against the JV, the freshmen, and without pads and say let's play full contact football. Yeah. You get the same results.
Yeah. It's something that's going to come up a lot, I'm sure, in the coming months and even building into next season. So I'm sure we'll address it again. Anyway, let's look at some games this week. Drew, will start with a couple games in the Pine Tree Conference Class B. We mentioned Coney earlier. They've got a good one against Brewer coming off their first win, the Witches.
Yeah, you look at the records there, and you say Coney 3-1, Brewer 1-3. Well, it should be a cakewalk for Coney on its way to 4-1. But I don't know, because Brewer has been a little bit, hot and cold. They lost to Biddeford, a good Class B South team by 2 touchdowns, decently competitive game, 26-12. Lost to Falmouth, which is 2 points away from being 4-0, 27-15. Then they go against Lawrence. They get killed by Lawrence, who lost convincingly to Coney. But then they crushed Mount Blue, who handled Lawrence. So it's you don't really I'm not sure if we know exactly what team is there in Brewer just yet, and so. I mean, I'd pick Coney to win that game, and I would feel pretty confident in it. But this doesn't so much look like we're talking 35-42, something like that to nothing. I think Brewer can. Now they haven't been as good on the road as they've been at home, and they are going to Coney, so that's worth considering too. But I think that they can give Coney a tough battle.
Okay, another game. It's PTCB Lawrence at Class C North, Big 11, Winslow. Old rivalry. This was the rivalry in Central Maine for a long time until Winslow went from Class A to B after the 1990 season, and they just didn't play each other again for 27 years until last year in a game won by Lawrence 24-14. This year, the rivalry goes across the river to Winslow. It should be a good non-conference game. Lawrence 1-3. Coming off that disappointing loss to Coney, where you thought maybe they were building some momentum with that game against Brewer, and it just it fizzled out against Coney.
Yep.
Winslow had a really close loss to Gardner in week 2, but since then has had a couple strong wins. Had a great second half at Mount Desert Island last week. They were tied 8-8 at the half and ended up winning the game by 2 touchdowns. So 2 teams that both, you can. I know it's a cliche, throw the records out, but these kids, even though they didn't grow up with the rivalry, they know it, they've heard about it, and it should be a good game on Saturday afternoon at Winslow's Pool and Field.
Yeah, it's big to see just how Lawrence responds, because that is a moment where you need to respond as a team. We are getting the second half of the season and everything, and so do they come back with a better effort than we saw against Coney? They lost by 17 points at Coney last week. And I think for Savitsky, you talked about coming back from that Gardner game. That just seems like that's kind of the mark of a really good coach, to use a tough loss, and instead of that getting the team down and maybe translating into the next week, he has them ready to go.
Yeah. Coach, one of the games in your league that a lot of people will be looking at this Friday night is Oak Hill at Madison. You've seen Oak Hill, you saw Madison a couple times last year. How do you think this one might go?
I think Oak Hill's going to win in a close one, but they did very well last year against Madison's offense when they had Whalen and Bess. So they had a pretty good game scheme against them, and I just think that they'll have another good one this week. Yeah,
I remember I covered that game last year, and they really just slowed the game down and didn't let. You could tell the goal was fewer minutes of possession for Madison, fewer opportunities to have the ball in it. It almost worked. Madison won, but they really gummed up the works, and you could tell that it was. I think Franzosi said that after the game, like, this was not the kind of paced game that we are used to playing.
Okay. I'm still trying to figure out Madison, only because their 2 losses are to Wells and Lisbon, who have both undefeated. They're beating everybody. The 2 wins are to Class C Waterville and Class C Belfast. They just destroyed Waterville, beat them by 40, and then won a close game at Belfast. So trying to wonder, which Madison team's going to show up, the team that is competitive with Class C teams, or, the team that's, like everybody, struggled against the power of the league.
Yeah, I picked them to win that game against Lisbon last week, mostly because of the Waterville result. That was kind of in my head, like, okay, it looks like these guys are they could really hit the gas here and really be a good team, and then Lisbon totally handled them. So maybe Lisbon's that surprise team. We were talking about surprise teams, and Lisbon being this. Looking this good so far.
We'll find out how good they are, because they will be playing Wells this weekend. So
true. Yeah.
I'm sure everybody in the league's looking at that one.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that Lisbon's going to come out and just try to pound right at them and run right at them. So
yeah.
And quickly, we were another game. Gardner at Freiburg. It's 2 3-1 teams, and Freiburg has kind of been a little bit like Brewer, where on one hand, they have a loss to Lisbon, a class, down a class, 36-14, but then they beat York by 2 scores, which, throttled Gardner 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
2 or 3 weeks ago, whenever it was. So, again, kind of that we don't really know what team Gardner is in for, and it's going to be at Freiburg. So, team that beat Gardner last year, and if Gardner wins that game, they're 4-1, and they're in a nice perch atop Class C South with Levitt. So,
All right. One other game I'm kind of keeping my eye on is in Class D North. We have Mount View going up to Stearns all the way to Millinocket. Mount View coming off of back-to-back wins over Holton and Orono, gets them back to 2-2. See if they can keep that thing going with a win up at Stearns and get back into the playoff race in the North. Okay, that's going to do it for us this week on Gridiron Gurus. Thanks for watching or listening. For Drew, for Coach St. Hilaire, I'm Travis. Thanks for joining us.